Welcome back to Birds of a Feather Talk Together. We got together to record and ended up discussing a lot of what is happening in the science world right now and how all of the defunding/cutting of the NSF is going to affect the US. It's a pretty heavy topic, but we felt necessary to share with all of our listeners. Since John and Shannon work every day in both ornithology and science, they have a first-hand look at how horrific so many of these cuts are and can speak to the impact that this is going to have on all Americans. Since Shannon is Canadian, there's some interesting insight as well. We originally got together to talk about wood ducks, so we'll post that episode as well, separately. Please give this episode a listen though, because learning about the horrors of what this administration is doing to the science world is very pertinent and will affect us all. Okay, let's get into it.
I had to work this morning and I read about the person who lost funding for a project that was related to Project Feeder Watch with Cornell. And it was crazy.
This is my mantra is this is just a complete lack of appreciation for the broader bioeconomy. Mm-hmm. This is the money that NSF spends on that, on something like supporting Project Feeder Watch, goes straight back into the U.S. economy. It's not like it's, you can call it waste if you want, but the money goes back in. It circulates.
It's extending to every aspect of science, and this is what people are not going to pay attention into until they or their children or their grandchildren die because of the treatments they're not getting, because of the things that aren't being developed. That does not come from corporations. That does not come from companies. That comes from the public science that is funded through the National Science Foundation. And so that small amount of money is responsible for the biggest transformations in public and environmental health, which also translates to the economy because it even gets into things like alternative sources of energy. Its tentacles in the best possible ways are completely expansive. And so to deprive basic science of research because you think it's silly would mean that nobody described the rosy periwinkle from Madagascar who's got chemical compounds in it that cure childhood leukemia, for example.
Wow.
Most drug development is not coming from a computer, although these days computers are still being used more and more to refine chemicals that may be important in drugs, proteins, whatever. They're not finding them de novo. They're using what's known from basic biology. And so to cut off things because you think they're silly, like describing whatever might make a color of a rosy periwinkle, or the fact that someone is in biodiversity science documenting the biodiversity of the world, this is not trivial. It's not easy, but it is necessary for virtually everything. We have one planet. People can talk about going to Mars all they want. That's not going to happen in any kind of broad scale. I don't care what Elon Musk says or does. That planet is not habitable for humans in a long-term sense. So can you send people there? Well, maybe. But a colony of people there? No. So we need to worry about the planet that we actually are on and understanding that we are in a network interconnected to everything that's currently in Earth and that's going to come after us and that has ever lived on Earth. It is insane to keep destroying this planet. It's insane to not worry about pollution. It's insane to not find alternative sources of energy that change the carbon balance. It's insane. It's insane to go after the publishers of journals, which is starting to happen in the last week, having them document what they're doing and how they're choosing what to publish because they think the science, because government officials think the science is biased, think that the review process, the peer review process, the kind of the pillar of scientific verification or validation. To think that that is biased, yeah, okay, there are individuals who do things like that, but right now the Health and Human Services are focusing on a paper that was debunked looking at the relationship between autism and vaccinations that has had very good science done on it to show that that is not true. So if we're looking at who's misinterpreting or misusing, I'll put science in quotes because that wasn't science. That Wakefield study that was retracted wasn't science. And to use that to alter the way vaccines are being developed or might be delivered to you that's insane. It's so harmful. You know, when we were just growing up, AIDS was a death sentence, and when we lived in Louisiana for graduate school, we watched so many people die in the 80s of AIDS. And the fact that right now there are treatments that make it a chronic disease that can be managed and that the viral load can be sent to almost zero so that people aren't even infectious with it, and that they're living normal lifespans, at least in developed countries they are, why wouldn't we want things like that? It's science that does things like that. I mean, and it's science that produces the wonder of the things that we talk about in this podcast. You know,
yeah, when you talk about biodiversity, it's we're the stewards. So why wouldn't we spend money figuring out how it works and how it interacts and how we can help it? I mean, that just doesn't make any sense to me.
If we don't know how the elimination of species or individuals can affect the entire planet because we're also interconnected. You can think that you live in the U.S., and so many people do think that the U.S. is the pinnacle of everything. Well, the U.S. is a tiny blip in the biodiversity scale of the world. Tiny blip. So there's a lot more biodiversity outside the U.S. by orders of magnitude than there is inside it. But they're all connected too. All of life on Earth is connected, and that includes humans. Anyways, it's really
RJ,
depressing.
what did you want to talk about today?
Yeah, as I depress people. But,
Well, no, I actually wanted to ask, like, are you comfortable talking at all about how has this impacted your day-to-day direct stuff that you're working on as well? I mean, if you don't feel comfortable talking about that, we don't have to get into that, but I wonder if...
Yeah, we get lists of words to use instead of biodiversity, instead of diversity, because AI is doing very blunt searches across things. So yes, a postdoc in the museum who studies bird flu was fired from the USDA. They tried to rehire her, but they completely botched even that.
Oh my gosh.
And they're taking away, I was reading on social media, a woman who was studying computer science. She's a computer scientist, and she was studying how to train the best teachers in computer science across lots of different environments and for lots of different people. Well, her grant from the National Science Foundation was terminated.
Oh my gosh.
Someone in birds who's studying hummingbirds and sexual dimorphism in hummingbirds had a postdoctoral grant that was funded. It was withdrawn and retracted. They are lucky that their institution and their advisor seem to be able to keep the project going, but that means it won't come with the National Science Foundation marks on it. So people will not know that that was funded by public dollars, right? All the wonder of things is public dollars that are going into that. Public.
Within the museum realm, one of the groups that's come under attack was this small, agency called the Institute for Library and Museum Services. And we had a interaction with colleagues from the university that are associated with the University of Chicago on the Committee on Evolutionary Biology last week. And I learned that colleagues from the Morton Arboretum and the Brookfield Zoo had both had grants taken away there that they'd had. And, this is a small little agency, but it's, has a broader impact than just museums and libraries. And so, all this stuff is going to have a cumulative effect of really slowing down science in the U.S. in a way that just doesn't make sense in my opinion, from an economic standpoint or any other standpoint that you want to come up with.
I mean, what are we saying to young people who are going into science right now? If you're beginning graduate school, okay, you can hide for 5 to 7 years, do your research. If your institution maintains funding for you and hasn't withdrawn your or rescinded your offer, which at least from our perspective, the University of Chicago is honoring all of that and views this as a chance that they'll get better scientists and better students, because so many schools have had to rescind their offers to graduate students, which is absolutely devastating. What do you do? You've planned your whole life around, I got into this school, I'm going to do X, Y, or Z thing while I'm there. I'm going to interact with all these scientists. I'm going to interact with the public. I'm going to expand my mind. I'm going to learn new things and apply them in new ways. What are we telling them? That they can't have a career? This is what we're telling them. And then science will get older and older and older as we age, and nobody's there to replace us because they can't. They have to make a living. So what are they going to do? And we lose all of the brain power. People are not, if you look at the distribution of Nobel Prize winners since the U.S. Was so important in rebuilding the world after the Second World War, and that attracted all these kinds of scientists to the freedom that the United States offers for science and the promise that it has. I mean, as an immigrant, I feel this, and I think most American citizens don't. And it pisses me off, frankly, that Americans don't understand the value of this country in that sense. I mean, it's truly special thing. The U.S. education system, the university system, might be one of the greatest advances in the history of mankind to create a system like that. And what are we doing here? They're using our tax dollars to do this. So that means they're doing it in our name. And that, to me, is just not okay to do that in my name with my tax dollars. And to have a say in this is why I became a U.S. citizen. Because I had to have a vote. That's the only thing we can do. So you have to lobby your officials. And that includes at all levels, whether that's from the people running for school boards, such that books aren't banned in schools, because we can't keep denying biological realities. Well, I guess we can, but it's not going to get us to a good place. So lobby or run. The hope I have is seeing all these young people running for public office because they too want to say in how their democracy in their country works and what the future of the country looks like for them. These old white rich guys are not leaving the legacy that young people can walk into, right? They're selfishly trying to preserve their own or promote their own power, intensity, and money. And they've gone off of some deep end about what that means. And that means it's harmful for their kids too, because the treatments that are not being developed, they're not going to protect their kids, and their riches aren't going to solve a problem that they may have, because there's only so much money will buy you out of.
And in my opinion, estuaries are just as important as golf courses, maybe more so.
More so.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm on a soapbox, I know, but just watching what's happening and going to meeting after meeting where people are trying to figure out, if I say this or if I don't use this word, maybe artificial intelligence applied so stupidly and bluntly won't trigger them to automatically take away my grant money. I mean, what on earth? It's 2025, and this is what we're doing. We're using the most sophisticated computational biology that's ever been developed to bluntly say the Enola Gay should not be in a website. I mean,
Gosh.
we can't be better than that. It's so dumb. I hate dumb. I don't do dumb well, and this is
speaking
dumb.
of that, the project I was reading about that was related to Project Feeder Watch. It had the word diversity in it, but it was related to bird diversity, and that's what they think got it flagged, which is hilarious.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
Yeah. I mean, and what you have no ability to try to convince them otherwise the way it's working. And so, again, the National Science Foundation is still taking grants, and they've got proposal calls out there, but so everybody's trying to figure out, how do you write a grant that will actually pass muster in this world? And, my worry too is that that's a moving target. That once you take care of all the diversity words,
Right.
There's going to be some other words that come up.
Yeah.
I have a suggestion. You should put white power in there.
See, I could never do that, even to get funding. See, that's the thing, is I have ethics and morals that are not compromisable. And I will not do things like that to be funded.
Yeah.
Never. It's not in my nature. I hate things that are unfair. I hate things that are stupid.
I just
am not going to compromise what I think is right, not even to get funding, not for fame or any of the other things that scientists have compromised their own integrity for. There's just no way. It's not worth it. You got to look yourself in the mirror, and you have to say, what have I done today to make the world a better place? Right now, for us, that's really a local thing, right? We worry about the students that work with us and each other.
So I'm going to disagree with you for a second on the local side of it, because
in other words.
No, I mean, it's also an international thing. I mean, on this podcast, we've talked about birds from all over the world already. And, we interact with people from all over the world as part of our jobs on a regular basis. And that's one of the things that is also special about a place like the Field Museum, for instance. And the idea that actually could be threatened because we don't want to consider ourselves a diverse country, or have, we want to make America great again, as opposed to looking at our position in the entire world and saying, how can we help? It's an interesting time, to say the least.
I mean, to those who much has been given, much is expected. And that is true in the United States of America, which has been, the people who have lived here have been given a lot. Not that they haven't worked hard for it, but they have been given a lot by the world because of their position in rebuilding it, in particular after Second World War. So Americans are really lucky to be born here. And they should honor that by making sure that other people in their own countries have access to similar opportunity.
And there's this absurdity to it, that the technology we have can be used in so many productive ways with respect to studying biodiversity anywhere in the world. And the idea that we wouldn't want to do that as much as possible and help teach as many people as possible to do it is really hard to take right now.
I mean, if you look at something like the Pritzker Lab, for example, more than 600 people have been trained there in the last 20 years from 40 or 50 countries. So those people come here, they take advantage of our expertise and our willingness to train people and the collaborations we have all over the world and the excellence of our collections and the comprehensiveness of our programs. And then they go back to their own countries and preserve their biodiversity, educate their students, take leadership roles at all levels of government and education. That's how we make the world a better place. This is the soft power that people talk about. But it's so important. And the things that are happening right now will inhibit people from coming to the United States to study with us. Either they won't get visas or they won't come because they They don't feel comfortable here. They don't feel safe with the way the government is behaving towards people. And they don't want to put a single penny into the U.S. economy of their own. Right. My own family is like that, right? You know, what would get my family to cross the border? I don't know right now. Probably me getting sick or something like that, because most Canadians live within, 50 kilometers of the border. And when I was growing up, we would cross the border to get gas. If you were towards the mall side of this tiny town I grew up in, you would go across the border there to get gas because it was closer than going downtown. Which downtown does not mean much in the city of Trails. Tiny place with a few stoplights. And that was just the way we lived, When I was growing up, if you wanted cereal with marshmallows in it, you had to cross the border. Because there wasn't cereal like that in the grocery store, even if my mom did declare it as candy, said we couldn't eat it for breakfast. But if we wanted
That's
McDonald's,
American food,
we weren't allowed to eat it either, Shannon. If that makes you feel better.
We had to cross the border for fast food, which sounds insane. But getting McDonald's line cookies was a really big deal, and now they don't even make them. It was a really big deal when I was a kid. That's what we wanted at McDonald's, was McDonald's line cookies, so we could figure out all the little people inside of them. The characters inside of them, right? And trade the characters. Yeah. But, there was no McChicken sandwich. Yeah. There was no McChicken sandwich in Trail unless my Nona made it for us. And and it wasn't called that, right? So not that fast food is that big of a deal. I'm not saying that. But the countries were we didn't need anything to cross the border growing up. Now you need a passport. But as a kid, you didn't need ID as a kid to cross the border. It was just, my sister-in-law is not going to Trader Joe's anymore because that requires a trip into the U.S. And now there are going to be a lot of alternatives in Canada that Canadians are coming forward with to try to reduce their dependence on the United States, which... Anyway,
which has economic implications for the U.S. in the end.
Exactly, that does no good for us. Yeah.
Canadian tourism is off more than 30%. Those are dollars.
Wow.
Canadian snowbirds are not going to Florida and Palm Springs because they're
selling
refuse.
Properties.
And they're afraid.
I just read an article about them selling second homes, which I have no problem with, but
well, right. No, it's completely understandable and preventable. It's not. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the question is, is there a negative side to it? And as Shannon's talking about it, there just isn't.
Look at the heads of these, of most of these tech companies. They're not Americans. Elon Musk did not start out as an American. Peter Thiel is not an American.
Wait, what's your point with that? What do you mean?
They're immigrants. They come to the U.S. because of the promise of the United States that gives them to really dream their dreams and live as big as they possibly can with their ideas. And I may think that they've perverted the process by the end of it, but they did that in this country because this is where people do this. Because this is where you have the flexibility and the freedom to go way outside the bounds of what science or what reasoning could be. Because that rugged individualism that is so much a part of like the Marlboro Man and things like that when I was growing up. But that's how science really progresses, is when people take these giant leaps. And the place that gets funded is the United States through the National Science Foundation. In large part, the internet didn't come from a company. It came from the government wanting to communicate with each other.
And like you're saying, the more you bring in people into the system, the more creativity and new ideas you get. No doubt about it.
Do you guys ever get nervous that we said Trump's hair looks like a tufted puffin on an episode?
Yeah, it appalls me because comparing a bird to
That's
that is really offensive to the bird. So I take offense to the bird on behalf of the bird for such a thing. But, we can make fun of that. We can make fun of that all we want. And there's, it gets to the basis instincts of me to want people who are doing this much suffering are inflicting this much suffering to suffer too. But, the reality is no matter how different people are, we still are part of one species, and we still all are connected to each other. And we still have an obligation to people, even those who have the worst possible disagreements with us about even fundamental things about what being a decent person means, which I actually think there's probably not all that much dispute with on average. It's just been exploited to be divisive, and nobody's asking the questions about what it takes to be a decent person, because that's going to be a unifying thing across the world, what a decent person is. The golden rules, whatever you feel about religion, these rules exist for a reason, because this is how societies have worked. Right? Or the ideals of how society should work. So granting people grace is hard. I don't do it sometimes very well, but I think it's a really important thing to do. And then to figure out how we stop hurting each other so desperately, how we stop hurting the earth so horribly. Anyways, that's a really strong soapbox for me. And the destruction.
No, I think it's important to talk about. Yeah.
You don't build things this way. And the government, to me, is being shown to have nowhere near as much waste in the places they've looked for it that people thought. So if you can still get your cancer treatment, get it now. Get your vaccinations now before the stupidity takes over and you're deprived from your basic rights, Measles, the fact that measles could be an epidemic is insane. This is 2025.
I know.
I think it's as a segue. I think it's really critical to find things out there in the natural world that you can actually enjoy right now.
Yes.
So.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why I'm super grateful for this podcast, because I found a whole bunch of things I didn't know about today, and finding about new things and new science that people have done and is exciting and fun and intellectually stimulating and honorable, all of those things. So I'm grateful to this podcast, and I'm glad people are listening, because then we keep doing it. And so I keep getting my mind expanded, and, maybe people get half an hour to an hour respite from whatever else is going on in their lives. And the fact that people are so nice when they email us, that's a hopeful thing too.
Yeah, we've gotten some really nice mailbag questions lately, and some more coming up. So, I mean, it's really awesome to get the positive feedback and know that people are enjoying this.
Well, I'll step off my soapbox and pick up my binoculars then.
No, it's important to let everybody know about all this, Shannon. I feel like so many people just read headlines and, don't really know what's going on, and there's so much that's happening at once. So I think it's really important for you two to talk about it. And so everybody that listens does know how it's impacting both of you and people that you know and people that are actually in the science field. Because, Amanda and I are outsiders. It's not directly impacting our jobs yet, but we're reading about everybody that it is impacting. So I think this was really great to talk about, just so people can know.
I got to buy a lottery ticket. Because that's the only way I'm going to be able to fund the people that I love. Is through that infinitesimally small chance.
So I have a segue. So wood ducks are in the show Parks and Recreation, which is about a government operation. In the intro, there's a big wood duck mural on their office.
Really?
Awesome.
Yeah. I
I've
always
never
love
watched
that there's like,
show.
oh, it's pretty funny. I always enjoyed it.
I wonder who
It kind of
painted
just mocks like, yeah, I know.
Yeah, who
I
did
googled
that?
it. I found the picture. I'll post it or something, but it's really cool. But I feel like that's the most famous wood duck I can think of.
I mean, this bird is just one of the more beautiful birds in North America.
Yes.
And I'm surprised how much it flies under the radar.
Thanks everyone for listening. This is a bonus week where we get 2 episodes. We also have an episode on wood ducks that was released this week as well, so make sure to check that one out. Reminder, if you have a question for us, you can reach us at podcast.birdsofafeather@gmail.com. Also, if you're enjoying this, please leave us a review and share this with someone who you think would enjoy it. We're trying to grow and we really would appreciate it. All right, see you all next week. Love you all.